what we are saying is, hey, right now you have this unified infrastructure that allows you to be a payment expert. And guess what? If you want to try and test different services, now you have access to an app store of services. You go in the private dashboard, it can just like toggle on and off like the services you want to use. You can A/B test them. A/B testing in the world of payments is simply impossible.
Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to the Asia Tech Podcast. Gabriel Le Roux, a co-founder and the CEO of Primer, is back with us today. Gabriel, thank you so much for coming back to the show. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be back, Michael.
Yeah, I wanted you to come back on like 6 months later, and it's 5 months later. And frankly, the last time we recorded this was because the last time we recorded this was in December. I know it's like a blur for me as well. But I was thinking before we got on the call that like the weather must be so much better today than it was when we recorded last time. No.
It is actually a little bit better. I'm sitting in London right now, and we finally having some sunny days. So yeah, it's definitely better. But time is flying. I can't believe it's been already 5 months.
Yeah, we recorded on December 13th, and I think I published it on December 23rd. I was looking at it before. I was like, wow, I can't believe it was that long. I literally thought it was in February when we did it. I'm not kidding.
Same here.
Wow. So I wanted to record with you again because I remember what we talked about last time, right? Like it was all about the evolution of payment needs, like the impact of integrated payment ecosystems, all the data-driven stuff you're doing in an AI, all the things you were building at Primer. We can talk about that too, but it was really the genesis of this call was you published something, and again, I don't know if it was a week ago or 3 weeks ago now, about Stripe. So one of the big payment providers made this big announcement. And I really wanted you to kind of go through what that was and what the implications were, and then where Primer fits in there and why it matters so much. Yeah, is that cool?
Okay, so I think, just taking a step back here. So, last time we chatted, we discussed about Primer, and I think it's good to share a bit of context, right?
Yep.
Primer was started 4 years ago with by myself and my co-founder, and we both used to work at Braintree, which is a company that got acquired by PayPal back in the days. And Braintree was and still is like a payment service provider. And the one thing that we realized with my co-founder is how online businesses were looking to expand their stack with more services to create unique commerce experiences, to provide the best possible user experience for the end user, and to essentially transform payments into a growth lever. Right, and when I say that, when I say using multiple services across the payment stack, these can be pretty much anything, right? Payment service providers, fraud solutions, operation management software, communication services, essentially any tool that you want to use or the merchant want to use across the payment lifecycle, right? And so, in order to do that today, it's very, very complicated. You have to do multiple integrations. It's very, very, complex. You need to create a connection between services, which are typically not talking to each other. And that's pretty much what we're solving. We're saying, hey, if you want to actually transform the way you're leveraging payments, if you want to leverage all those different services, here we are. Primer is this unified infrastructure that allows you to connect to all these services and create sophisticated workflows. Now, why this is critical is because we've always been thinking about payments as, this open ecosystem of services that should be leveraged on the merchant side. And that's never been the story of the payment service providers, which have always been saying, hey, use us for everything. We are the ultimate and the only solution you should use to power payments.
Right.
And our view was, no. The world needs to be open. There's no one size fit all. Merchant want to use all the best services out there to power their, product and services. And that's why, when the announcement was made, a couple of weeks ago, by Stripe saying, hey, we are sort of opening up right now. We are actually quite excited at Primer because we are finally, large provider out there, which have been typically very much closed ecosystem, are thinking about opening up their product and services to essentially provide what the merchant have been asking for years. And we've been very much driving that change out there in the ecosystem. And we've been the one like defining the innovation of payments, and to see like more established players like essentially like replicating what we're doing or validating what we're doing is very exciting.
Can I ask you this? What do you think encouraged them to do it? And I guess there are a bunch of different topics to cover here, but do you think they've been thinking about doing this for a while, but that just technologically, like you know this from just building software and being involved in the building of software, you build this thing, you bolt something onto it, you build some more software, you build some software on top of it, and then when someone says to you, "Hey, can we just use this?" In a way, sometimes it's not only because you just want to get them inside your walled garden, but it's because when you originally built your software, you just thought, hey, let's build more services to help our customers kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then separating it out, it just gets technically really hard. Anyway, what encouraged them to
Well,
do this?
I don't think it's like, there's probably like a technical aspect of things, but it's also like a fundamental, like, shift in the way, like, you know, they're thinking about themselves and thinking about their business, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like, if you've been pushing this narrative of like, we're going to do everything,
Right.
and you should use us for everything, like, it's quite a massive like shift to say, hey, now we actually like opening up and providing optionality. The question now that we need to ask ourselves is to what extent, like, their ecosystem is actually open, right? And that's probably like a big question we need to ask ourselves now.
Yeah.
The reason for that change as well is the the world out there has changed. Merchants understand payments a lot more. They want to use the best services across the payment lifecycle. So this notion of like, one provider to do everything is simply not resonating anymore at all. If you go and talk to anyone out there, they want to use, you know, the best services for each and every aspect of their payments. And so it's not so much a we want to do it because we think it's a nice thing to do. You have to be open. You have to provide optionality. You have to be flexible. That's been part of our DNA from literally the day we started Primer.
Right.
We're like, we need to create that unified open infrastructure. That's the only way to go when it comes to like, creating the best and the optimal way of managing payments.
So what changed for you guys? Like there must have been a high five moment. I don't know if that translates to the rest of the world, but there must have been a moment where like you and your co-founder woke up and you were just like, you went to the office, you started chatting with each other and you're like, wait a second, we've been talking about this for years now. This thing just happened. I'm sure that other payment providers are going to do the same thing, right? I mean, if they can technically do it, they're going to have to do it at some level, right? Because if the
Yeah.
biggest people are doing it, even the mid-level players are going to have to do this. What was that moment like inside of Primer, and like, what's the significance for you guys?
Well, I think for us, it's just like extra validation that what we've been driving for years now is actually uh, resonating with like established players, right? But the reality is that the true innovation is being driven by us, right? Like we are essentially saying like, hey, listen, like the world of payments goes beyond like the sort of like PSP aspect of things. You need to have like this new framework to integrate and to manage payments, and this is what's being driven by Primer. We're working today with like very large enterprises across the world which are using us to really transform the way they've been like managing their payment stack. But I think for us, it's just an interesting transition and phase that we're seeing like in the world of like the payment service providers, and the likes of Stripe trying to make like their product more like modular is
Yeah.
also interesting because they're going to need to have distribution channels too for these products and services, and this is where like we are like extremely well positioned to do that,
I was
right?
thinking the
And
same thing. That's what I
so
was going to ask you. Like, that's why I
yeah.
said it was like a high five moment, because for you guys, you've been sitting there talking about this and kind of proselytizing, right? Trying to convince other people that this is the way it should be. And you woke up one day and like, there it is.
Yeah.
And now what do you do now? And how does it change your business, do you think? Because now you've been not convincing, but telling your clients these walled gardens have to fall. The whole ecosystem has to be more open. Now you can go back and knock on the door and go, you see what they just did? They just modularized their business. So now you can use this thing to then pick and choose all these other services that you want. That's got to make your clients happy too, no?
I think like in principle, yes, right. So the more like the world becomes modular, the more options are being provided to our clients. So it's a trend that is going in the right direction for sure, right? And so I think, this notion of like the PSPs trying to be more modular is going to drive like a lot of innovation and changes as to how like those companies have been, managing their products. And yet ultimately it's going to provide like more options to the merchants, which is something that we're going to be driving, right? This notion of like, having access to services in a few clicks and to have the ability to enable them on Primer, without the need to go and, talk to an engineer is is so unique if you think about it, right? Because
Yeah.
now you can also like test services that typically would take ages to be tested, right? And so,
Wow. Yeah, because we didn't
yeah,
talk
I
about
mean,
this
yeah,
last time, but can you dig deeper on that, because this is actually kind of important to me. I don't think we talked about this last time. This idea that like these services now are easily integratable across the board means that I want to see if this thing works. That doesn't work good for me, but I can just click on this button,
yeah,
enable this, disable that, try this one.
yeah,
You know what?
yeah,
Actually, A was actually better than B. Anyway, this is the best solution. I just click it and just go back to work doing the things that I want to do, which is either selling my
exactly,
products or doing other things. Yeah.
exactly. So there's this concept of there's two things. Like
Go ahead.
on the merchant side, like
Yeah.
you want to have the best possible way of accepting and managing payments.
Yeah.
But what you don't want to do is to relearn payments all the time, have your team like constantly integrating your APIs and all that, right? Um, so what we are saying is, hey, right now you have this unified infrastructure that allows you to be a payment expert. And guess what? If you want to try and test different services, now you have access to an app store of services. You go in the private dashboard, it can just like toggle on and off like the services you want to use. You can A/B test them. A/B testing in the world of payments is simply impossible, right? Because you need to go and do some integration. It's going to take some time. If you do integration, you're actually committing to using the product eventually. You allocate resources and all that. What we're saying is, hey, what if you have one single API, one unified infrastructure, and now you can do whatever you want with your payments. You want to test like something on the checkout, like a payment method, a buy now pay later, a wallet, you can do it. You want to test a fraud provider, like, because you've been seeing like, high cases of fraud, with your payments, you can do it. And maybe one will be like better suited for the US, another one will be better suited for a different product line. You want to try to create like a ways to present the payment method on the checkout with dynamic presentment, you can do it. So all things that would typically be super technical are now like uh, accessible by anyone. You don't need to be an engineer to start doing these things. So we're making payments like approachable, easy to use. And while this is like very useful on the merchant side and very unique, this is also so unique and so relevant for all these services within the ecosystem, because now they can get super fast activation of their product and services.
Yeah, because all they need is one person to integrate with it. That's Primer, and then everybody else can just integrate it with a press of a button, which I don't think I
Exactly.
fully understood last time. I've done a lot of work on this since the last time we talked. I think that was one of the other reasons why I wanted to get you back on the show. I imagine, and again, tell me where I'm wrong, but I imagine now, if the PSP-A is the best one for Indonesia, but PSP-2 is the best one for Malaysia, that if you have an online store, or frankly, even an offline store, you can just click this and have like if Indonesia use this, if Malaysia
Yeah,
use this thing, right? I mean, that's way better than just
but
going, oh, for fuck's sake, we'll just use PayPal kind of thing.
exactly. But
And nothing against PayPal again, but yeah.
no, no, of course, of course. But you've essentially like described like a very simple workflow in Primer.
Yeah.
So like the way like the journey for someone using Primer is going to be uh, a couple like fairly simple, right? You integrate our product, it's a very simple integration, and now
Yeah.
you have access to like essentially like a bunch of tools to optimize the way you're going to be managing payments, and you have like our universal checkout, and that's essentially a product that allows users to have a fully agnostic checkout, have ways to agnostically like store like payment details. So now you essentially like gain back control over your payments. You can also like define how to present payment methods on the checkout. I want to show like a payment methods to someone in Indonesia. because that payment method may not be relevant to someone in Australia, right?
Yeah.
But then what you describe here is a workflow. So you've described a very simple workflow. If Indonesia use this payment service provider, if Australia use this other one. But imagine if you could actually start doing a lot more things. If the user is in Indonesia and they have a riskier profile, I want to do a fraud check before authorizing the payment.
Yeah.
And imagine if you start doing things and if that user is VIP and the payment is being declined, I want to send him a text message saying, "Hey, Michael, your payment has been declined. We're so sorry. Here is a coupon code, or here is a link so that you can use another payment service provider or another payment method." Sorry. These are the things that you can start doing on Primer, literally by dragging and dropping elements within our workflow. And that's pretty much what we've seen back then with our co-founder
Go ahead.
when we're whiteboarding things, at Braintree and PayPal. We're sort of doing, my founder on the technical side was whiteboarding the ecosystem of the merchant. And when we're asking the question of, okay, how are we going to do that now? The answer was well, I don't know. It's going to be very difficult, right? And that's why we created Primer.
I just lost my train of thought, but I can just imagine a bunch of these different workflows, right, where it really matters. And imagine, because I've been on a bunch of sites, whether it's, if you don't have an American Express card, really simple stuff, you can't pay for this. Well, you must have another option, right? And I can just see a merchant, even an SME, and I wanted to ask you specifically about SMEs, right? Because large institutions have big tech teams that can kind of do a bunch of integrations. And frankly, for them, if it takes more time, okay, there's a trade-off for how much money they can make. But small companies don't have any integration teams, right? So for them, it must be just a panacea of wait a second, now I can take payments from anywhere at any time. It's got to change their business a lot, no? Do you see a big difference between the SMEs and these bigger institutions?
So actually, what we see is, so we've been working primarily with mid-market and large enterprises. So that's been the type of businesses we've been working with. And yes, maybe they have a large payments team, but what they want to do is transform the way they are managing payments, and they want to compress their roadmap, and they really want to sort of start leveraging payment as a growth lever. Now, what you're saying is absolutely correct. The more the world out there is being educated on the power of payments, the more Primer becomes relevant. So even small companies, are starting to use Primer to future-proof the way they're going to be managing payments, right?
Yeah.
They start using us now, and then in a couple of years, maybe they want to do a lot more things with their payments. They want to launch new markets. They want to sort of optimize the way they leverage the operational aspect of payments, and that's it. They have us already integrated, so it's just a matter of a few clicks for them to start leverage payment as an asset.
Again, just from an uninformed person, can I ask you another question? Does this make it easier for you to integrate with big kind of global e-commerce players that also need to have a lot of flexibility? I think about a company like Shopee that operates out of Singapore but operates in every country in Southeast Asia, and all of the payment integrations could, like you said, could be different. Are they a potential client of yours as well?
Of course, yeah. I mean, all these large e-commerce platform, e-commerce merchants with international exposure, customer around the world, complex payment flows, complex operational flows related to payments are typically the type of companies using us, right? And we're working with these large enterprises across the globe.
So again, I just feel I wanted to get you on because I wanted to figure out what the change in your business is. I feel it opens it up to a lot more innovation as well, right? Because once the individual component of the payment itself just gets separated out, then all those individual services are also seen to be up for grabs as well. No?
Yeah. So you're right. So I with Primer, what we've been doing is we are essentially integrating the services that our merchants want to use, and we've built a lot of innovation on our side to quickly add these services. So for us, it's the more the world out there becomes modular, the more options we can provide to our customer. And that's and we are only incentivized to do what's best for our merchants. That's very much our DNA, right? And so I think what it's going to be very interesting to see, like, the appetite for our merchants to use some of these services, and to see how they're going to be used, right? So yeah, we're quite excited to see, like, the reaction of the merchant out there when it comes to, like, some of these services becoming more modular.
Yeah, because I mean, you guys are essentially agnostic to which services your customers
Completely
use, as long as they're
agnostic.
using Primer to
Absolutely.
access those services. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're
Yeah.
completely agnostic because, like, if essentially if you want to use some of these services, you need to have a relationship with them, right, as a merchant.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, and for you don't care. Does it drive growth for you guys as well, you think? And like, how fast do you think it has an impact on you? Just this modularization
Well,
of these services.
yeah, I think, like, well, first of all, like, Primer has been growing, like, extremely, like, rapidly, like, because essentially, like, we're not, the reason why Primer exists is because we've seen the problem firsthand, right?
Yep.
So, you know, we've seen, like, extremely fast adoption of our product and services across, like, all our key markets, right?
Good for you.
Yeah, it's great. It's quite amazing, and I think, we're working hard to make sure that, we're continuously innovating, providing more services to our users, and for them to really grasp and understand the power of our product. Um, but yes, I think, the world out there becoming more modular is obviously, like, fueling our growth, and ultimately that's also gonna eventually, like, positively impact, our merchants, right? Because, maybe, I don't think it's the case right now, but maybe in a couple of years from now, um, some of these services are going to be, like, extremely powerful for, like, a subset of merchant in a given vertical, help
Yep.
them solve, like, very specific use cases, all that, and we're going to be the sort of underlying structure to help them use these services in a sophisticated way. And so yeah, we're going to see, I'm sure, like, some growth out of, like, the change happening in the ecosystem.
Well, you're going to have to, because the way I look at it now, it's almost like the operating system for the payments business, in the sense that like everybody can connect into the service that you provide, and like
Yeah.
you said, you don't really care who it is. Do you like, how easy is it for someone to integrate with you? You said you're building some innovation around that. Do you build your own dev tools? Is probably the wrong word, but that's
Yeah.
so people can actually build on your platform.
Yeah. So we have, like, the so I mean, our docs are public, right? So we
Yep.
actually, like, integrating Primary is a very, very simple integration, right? Uh, and that's obviously, like, fundamental if you want to, be used by a lot of companies out there, right?
Yep.
What's interesting is our integration is very simple, but the moment you have Prime integrated, like, our product is so powerful, right? So, and essentially we're saying, uh, like, to our merchants that you integrated us once, and then, like, anything else can be done, like, from, like, the Prime dashboard, from the Prime product, right? Enable services, creating workflows. You can just publish them. You don't need to sort of, like, ask for, like, engineers to help you do all these things, which would that's typically the way it works today, by the way,
Yeah.
right? You go and talk to businesses, and they're going to tell you, like, hey, we have a 24 months roadmap of things you want to do to optimize payments.
Right.
And our view is, like, why?
What are you doing?
What are you doing? Like, but and we also understand, right? Because it's,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
different APIs you need to integrate,
Yep.
then the data may be impacted, then the underlying work stream, like reconciliation, may be impacted. You may have teams, around the business which are consuming payments that now also going to have to work on a few things. What we're saying is, hey, okay, we understand all that, but it doesn't make any sense for you to do everything yourself. It does make sense for you to use these services,
Yeah.
but technically, we should be the underlying infrastructure to power all this. So no, you're not going to spend 24 months. You're going to spend a few weeks.
I was going to say 24 days, probably.
Yeah,
I don't want to put any pressure
exactly.
on you, but it's more likely that it's 24 days than 24 months. I think I might have said this to you the last time I recorded, but I always feel like for early stage companies, the biggest problem is just having your potential customers discover you. And I don't think it's just like a marketing problem per se, right? But like you say, if you walk into a potential client and they're like, we've got a 24-month roadmap, they may be saying that because they don't know how easy it is to integrate with you, which then gives them access to all the services they were going to integrate over the next 24 months. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about market education, right? And so yeah, I think, obviously, like, the reason why they have those long and big roadmaps is because no one out there could solve,
Yeah.
like, their vision. And that
Yeah.
it goes to show, like, that the current, technology out there were not suited for the vision and the ambition that the merchants have with their payments.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think from our view, there's a lot of work we're doing on education, explaining how Primer can be used, the use cases, all that, and yeah, we're doing a pretty good job, and we're seeing like now like more and more merchants coming to us being like, okay, we know what you guys are doing, let's actually work together.
Yeah, it sounds like you've invented something new, and when one merchant
Absolutely.
uses it, yeah, but I really believe this. And then when one merchant uses it, and another one finds out that like, oh, we integrated our stuff in like 3 weeks, they're like, wait a second, which kind of magic allowed you to do that kind of thing, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I think I got what I wanted. I just wanted to understand what this change was going to mean for you guys. Again, I'd love to have you back on in 6 months because I want to learn more. I don't want to talk about it today, but I want to learn more about the growth, your funding and stuff like that, and just like the more on the business side. But we can do that. Maybe we have your co-founder come on if you want. Anyway, I got what I wanted today. I really appreciate your time. And as I learn more and more about payments, the whole thing that you're doing actually gets more and more interesting to me. So I really appreciate your time today.
Well, follow Primer on LinkedIn and check our website, because there's always a lot of things that we are pushing out there, and it's a very exciting time for anyone in payments, and it's also a very exciting time for our merchants, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that we are powering as the world's first unified payments infrastructure out there.
Yeah, and look, the thing that I always say to the merchants is, or about the merchants is, they've always had these ideas about how they can make their businesses better and more flexible, right? They want to do what's best for their customers as well.
Absolutely.
And I've been, as I said earlier in the conversation, I've been on plenty of websites where I wanted to pay for something. I wanted to give you my money. And just like the system that you wanted to use for your payments just didn't work for me. And I just had to leave and go buy it somewhere else. That's a fact, actually.
It is a fact, and it shouldn't actually be a fact.
No.
That's the thing.
No. Anyway. Okay. And the other thing I will say to you is this. If you ever want to come back on, if you have a big story or a big announcement or, you know what I mean, some new thing that's happening, don't wait. Just make an appointment and call me and we'll talk about it for 15 minutes.
I'll do that.
I'd love to have you back on.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Michael.
Okay. Bye for now, man.
Take care. Bye.